Hi everybody, lovely to see you all this morning. Thank you for joining us. We're going to start on time at 11. There are still people coming in. I can still see the participant numbers coming up there. It is now 11 o'clock and I am absolutely delighted to be here today. My name is Judith Sloan and I am manager at Meet Cambridge, and I have my colleagues Leah and Amy on the call too. So lovely to have so many registrations. We were actually bowled over by the interest in this. To give you a little bit of background, Meet Cambridge was established in 1998. We're a not-for-profit organisation owned and managed by the Cambridge Colleges, Cambridge University and Cambridge University Press. We've got 50 lovely venues in our portfolio, everything from colleges to training centres to hotels. And I'm delighted to see that so many of our venues are also joining us today. We are over the moon to be able to offer this space where everybody can connect virtually. Ordinarily in Cambridge, Meet Cambridge would have held a client event this year, and as you know, that hasn't sadly been possible. But coming together today and to bring all of these excellent panellists together to share an experience is truly a wonderful thing. As you can imagine, Cambridge has actually this year been decimated by the effects of the pandemic on the event industry. And we know that everybody here on the call today has been affected too in one way or another. We're really missing Cambridge, missing the buzz of events, being out and meeting venues and clients. And there's nothing like seeing delegates form new friendships while they're discovering the city on visits. But I'm pleased to say that Meet Cambridge has been working throughout the pandemic, busy supporting clients and our venues. And even though very few events have actually taken place, our venues have been incredibly busy behind the scenes preparing for when we can get a full return. Some of our venues are open now, and government advice is that we can now host events for up to 1,000 people inside with social distancing. Although sadly at the moment, that doesn't include social events or private dining. As a community of natural planners, I know how difficult it's been to plan for the unknown. We've had so many questions put to us these last few months around the subject of in-person, virtual and hybrid events. So we thought it would be a fitting end to a very difficult year to bring the Meet Cambridge community together in this small way. And my thanks to this incredible lineup of panellists, Nick, Madalena, Susie, Rose, Zoe and Chris. Thank you so much. When conferences and events can take place again, we know that they'll aid the recovery effort. And when we've got a green light to go, we look forward to helping you once again with your future plans. I've just got a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please use the chat to introduce yourselves. I know at the moment it's difficult that we don't have those face-to-face networking opportunities, but do tell us where you're dialing in from and who you are in the chat. Use the Q&A for questions, and please do upvote any questions that you would like Nick to ask our panellists. Get your questions in early, because I do have experience that the ones that get in early tend to get upvoted quicker. And just to let you know that we are recording this session and we will share this with anybody that didn't attend and with our community after the event. Before I hand over to Nick, I just wanted to address a question that came up at the registration stage, and it was around industry report and lobbying of government about the events industry. The events industry has been working incredibly well collaboratively together with DCMS to drive the return of events. Collaboration has actually been at a huge scale, and the MIA, the Meetings Industry Association, actually created a roadmap which helped inform the guidelines. The government also arranged several test events this year, and several of myself and several of our colleagues at our venues actually took place at one of them, actually attended one of them. They were incredibly successful, and the findings of those events have helped drive the future. As of yesterday, the all-party parliamentary group, which has recently been reformed, has said that there is clear enthusiasm from MPs about backing the sector. And they've also announced that they'll be looking at supporting a number of issues, one of which is pandemic insurance, which I'm sure you will agree would be a massive step forward. We'll post some links into the chat for further reading on this. Now, I'm delighted to hand over to Nick. Nick is Domestic Bursar and Fellow at Robinson College and Director of Meet Cambridge. With a career spanning over 40 years in the industry, he has extensive experience. Nick, I'm delighted today that you're joining us and that you will facilitate this session. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Judith, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm not entirely sure that I like it when people say I've been in this business for 40 years, because it really does accentuate the lines that show around the eyes in particular. However, there we are. Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to be here and great to see so many familiar names coming up in the chat. I can't see you, I can't hear you, but it's lovely to know that you're there in spirit. So without any further ado, what I'm going to do is introduce each panel member to you and ask them to give us a very brief synopsis. You've already seen their introductions on the event webpage, so just a very brief word from each of them. I'm going to go down in the order that I've got, so starting with Zoe, if I may. Zoe, we can't hear you. I can't hear you. Can anyone else hear Zoe? No. Try again, Zoe. No, still can't hear you. Tell you what, Zoe, I'm going to leave you to see what you can work out, and I'm going to move to Rose. Rose, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, thank you, Nick. Hello, I'm Rose Padmore of Opening Doors and Venues, a PCO agency, and we organise large conferences, and like many of my industry colleagues, this year we have pivoted. I know that word's been used a lot, but we pivoted totally from physical face-to-face events to virtual events, and I'm looking forward to sharing our learnings with you all.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed, Rose. Susie.
Morning. Thanks, Nick. So I set up Susie Howes and Associates 22 years ago as an event organisation specialising in mostly private sector, some public sector events. But for the last 12 years, we've concentrated and specialised in large international academic events. We've been very fortunate in that all of the, I think we had 12 conferences lined up for this year. All of them have now moved to 21 and 22. So we're keeping the possibility of converting some of those to hybrid or virtual in mind, but at the moment I think the jury's still out on which way things will jump. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Susie. Zoe, how are we doing? Want to try again?
Yeah, shall I try again?
Aha!
Can you hear me now?
Hear you. Great.
So I'm Zoe, I'm the conference manager at St Catherine's College. I've been working in academic venues for around 13 years. Over the last year, we've been working with clients to postpone, sometimes unfortunately cancel, and to rearrange events. And we've been most recently looking at hybrid and virtual options for our clients to get people meeting again.
Great, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Madalena, tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Nick. I'm Madalena. I work with Rose at Opening Doors and Venues, and I've been doing that for over 9 years now. We normally organise events of varied shapes and sizes, but everything that we had on the calendar this year got cancelled or postponed, as Rose mentioned, and we moved totally to delivering virtual events, in particularly one large association congress this year, and already planning events for next year in the shape of virtual or hybrid at the moment.
Great, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. We should say that Madalena is calling us from Romania, which is that lovely view out of her back window.
There we go.
And finally, but by no means least, Chris.
Hi there. I'm a director of Venue Audio Visual. We're based in the centre of Cambridge, and we've been providing in-person and hybrid services, audio-visual services for conferences for over 15 years. And like most people, towards the end of March, all of our in-person bookings cancelled, so we pivoted our sort of experience of hybrid round and developed a platform for completely virtual events, and it's proved very popular, and we've carried out around 40 virtual events since March.
Yeah. Wonderful, thank you very much indeed, Chris, and everyone else. You can tell that their experience is exactly what we need in terms of hearing from them as an expert panel on some of the questions that we've had. So let's kick off with those straight away. I want to just, first of all, clarify something. One of the phrases that's come through several times in questions, but also from some of the panels this morning, is this expression hybrid meetings. And in order to be sure that we're all on a level playing field, I want to just ask Rose to clarify what her understanding of that is. So Rose, tell us what do we mean by hybrid meetings?
Well, I think that what we mean by hybrid meetings now, today, is actually a different picture to what we used to mean. Certainly, we've, for many years, live streamed our conferences to a virtual audience. So that is live streaming. We have also, there are three other options. So there's the live streaming, but then we have a situation where you've got the event taking place in a stage set or in a studio, but you've got no audience there, and the whole of the audience are virtual. Now, I would actually call that, rather than a hybrid, I would call that a broadcast, as Chris would confirm, that is more of a live stream or a broadcast. For me, a hybrid event is actually when you have two audiences. So you have an event taking place, a conference taking place in the venue with the usual stage set and with everything happening there, and with all the streaming and all the parallel sessions and the exhibition going on in that venue. However, you also have a significant virtual audience as well. So you're in a situation where you've got your face-to-face event going on, but you have also got a virtual conference going on that requires a lot of interaction. So they're not just sitting watching it, they are actually interacting, they're asking questions, they're networking. So we've got two audiences. So that to me is a pure hybrid.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. And that's quite interesting, this notion that we could reach a point where we have some in-person activity and still have some delegates who are joining us virtually. And that really leads me to the second sort of set of questions that we've got, which are really about confidence and delegates joining meetings. So there are two questions here. Delegates may not wish to travel, but more importantly, staff may not wish to return to face-to-face meetings. What's your view of that? And secondly, how can we encourage in-person attendance when people may still be nervous about large events and can't see the benefit in costs? Zoe, you're a venue. Tell us what your thoughts are on that.
I think that venue safety has to be the main focus for both event managers and venues going into 2021. And I think it's really important for organisers to be asking about what safety measures and accreditations venues have in place. We have the benefit as colleges, we've been operating in a COVID secure environment because we've had students returning for Michaelmas term. So I think our staff are more confident in dealing with events in sort of a COVID secure environment. But I would say as well that it's really important for organisers to ask delegates what they think. And it may be that some people are really keen to get meeting again, and some people are nervous, and you can reassure people by detailing all the safety measures that you have in place, but really it's about people feeling comfortable themselves. So that's kind of where, leading on to where hybrid events gives you that sort of best of both worlds.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. Madalena, do you want to add to that from your perspective?
I do think that there are delegates out there that are now ready to return, and if local, they will do so with more eagerness if they are local to the venue, and hence why the hybrid solution is probably the way forward, because it allows for that, and also it allows for people who live further away or are still weary of going out and mixing with large crowds to join virtually.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Susie, anything further to add?
I think it's essential to understand what's causing the reluctance to attend in person, which kind of dovetails in with what Zoe was saying. And certainly, I think there are real concerns about budgets. There's very few organisations in the world that haven't been hit financially by the pandemic, and budgets will simply have been cut for travel to conferences. It will take a while for flight destinations to come back to the worldwide landing everywhere that we've all experienced today. That's not going to come back quickly. And I think also there'll be an issue for some time of an unwillingness to release key staff, particularly in academia, to come and actually speak in person at conferences. I think that confidence will take quite a long time to come back. It was something that was almost the first thing we saw way before lockdown. By sort of Christmas, early January this year, we had academic speakers that who had been told by their university, you're not going anywhere, that's it, you're grounded, we need you here. So in order to come up with a solution, we need to look closely at what's driving that inability and or reluctance to travel.
Yeah.
And so I think Zoe's right. One of the ways to do that is to be absolutely sure about your venue. But I think to some extent, it's got to be it's a change that's going to take a while to happen. The world's been shocked rigid by this, and it's going to take some time for that to settle down again.
Yeah,
so
great.
We have technology. We have technology to assist us.
Which is a handy segue into my next question. Thank you very much indeed, Susie. Thinking about the technology and the platforms, we have two questions around that. For online events, how do you make them accessible for all? And which platforms in your experience would you recommend? And please, can you comment on the best platforms for different types of online events? For example, small versus large, interactive, etc. Chris, you're the obvious person to come to first on this.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, something that we learned pretty quickly from our clients wishing to push forward with virtual conferencing straight away, and from their delegates, was that rather than having sort of lots of gimmicky sort of additions to what they would normally expect at an in-person conference, they actually valued simplicity and reliability over those. So I would certainly say that something that's browser-based, that doesn't require software for all of the attendees, is a very good way to go. That means you can be really inclusive. So some of our conferences have had attendees from sort of lower income countries where they maybe don't have the infrastructure and the even the hardware within the institutes to sort of facilitate doing sort of really, super high res video streams and things. So if we can sort of build something that can do that for those that do have that infrastructure, but doesn't exclude people that don't, so it can sort of stream on multiple different bandwidths, for instance, that's been a key thing. So I think simplicity and sort of making sure that what you're doing is very much scalable to the infrastructure of the people that can to allow them to attend.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Rose, anything to add on that? Any platforms that you've experienced that you would recommend?
Yeah, I would say that the features that, and I agree with Chris definitely about the simplicity and reliability, but behind all that, to us as PCOs, we have experience of one specific platform, but we've researched many others and we're planning on working with others, and I'll speak more about that in a minute. But is actually the technical team behind that. So it's that confidence that you get with your supplier of the platform and their support. Now, I know there are platforms that you can use, and then you have to do a lot of the delivery and the technical support behind it. But if you're a small PCO team, to be honest, the best people to support you and give you confidence and give your client confidence are a technical team. So we actually, for the large conference that Madalena mentioned, which took place September, October this year, normally it would have 900 delegates face to face. We ended up closing registration at 3,000. We actually worked with an international PCO organisation, the Kennis Group, who had developed their own platform. Well, they were using sort of a number of platforms, but they provided the umbrella and the umbrella support that went with that. And we were able to sort of, within 3 months, change from a physical event to a virtual event, and it was a fantastic success. But what was good about that was they understood what a research medical conference needed, and all the sort of the parallels, the posters, the abstracts, the networking that was really, really important, and the opportunity to engage and ask questions and get feedback. We introduced a quiz, we had social events, but they, as the rest of us, were learning as they went as well, but their response to us was amazing. So they were responding. They may not, at the beginning when we had the conversation, they may not have said, yes, it does this, this, and this, and this. It was when we came to them with our requirements, so going back to understanding what the needs were, they listened to us and they said, hey, wait a minute, we can make that happen. And so in a very short time, so it was having those technical developers and the technicians working with us. So that was fantastic. Having said that, that was quite an expensive model, but then we have done lots of research, and I think we have learned that having that support, so working, the new partner that we're potentially going to be working with, it's a much simpler platform. However, again, their actual grasp and able to give us confidence is just what's ticked the box. We must have, I don't know, Madalena, how many have we researched? We've researched, it's gone, you know, beyond double figures. The number of demos and have just been incredible. So, but it is about, can it do what you need it to do?
We can maybe tap into you after the event,
yeah,
for some recommendations on that. That's marvellous. Thank you very much indeed, Rose. I'm going to move on to thinking about the finances associated with hybrid events. How can we make the hybrid event model work financially? It seems that it might be double the work, and we won't necessarily see double the return because you know, people might not pay the same for attending the event. Chris, any views on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think that in my view that with a hybrid event, there's so much you can do to include the remote participants in all facets of the conference, not just watching talks and being able to ask questions of the speakers and all of the sort of basic things, taking part in polling, for instance. You know, that's all a given. But there's really no reason why the remote participants shouldn't be more involved in exhibitions. You could have a camera crew that's actually roving around the venue, giving interviews to exhibitors and allowing remote participants to actually put questions in at that point, and so those can be put to the exhibitors, and really providing entertainment. For instance, you know, we did a conference for a biodiversity conference earlier in the year that had a live gig. You know, there's performers there, and actually, you know, both in person and remote participants would really enjoy that. So I think by sort of expanding their involvement in the event, you can expect to be able to charge not exactly the same as the in-person, but you can get a bit closer to it and really focus on the value for money there.
We're adding value there, which is great. Susie, I was going to ask you to comment on this as well, but I want to fold in another question before I come to you, because it seems to be opposite, which is about networking and adding value. How do you facilitate ad hoc networking, in inverted commas, over coffee type chats within a virtual event? And to what extent, if any, do you think that peer-to-peer platforms can play a role in online events? So what do you think about networking and how that adds value?
Well, I think before I answer that, I should make one important point, which is that throughout all of our careers, those of us who are organising events, we have had to use very rigorous budget modelling to make sure that if an event actually ends up with half the delegates we expected, will it still pay its way? And I think that's going to be even more key now. We're all venturing into the unknown to some extent, and we've got to be absolutely sure that whatever fees we set for virtual and real delegates, the whole thing has got to be able to pay its way at the end of the day. So our budget modelling will be even more key. I think that will be one of the most important things that we do. As far as networking within the event is concerned, it's got to be there. And actually what I find encouraging is, as somebody who prefers to do a live event, is that people, I think our impression is that people see that as a second best. They're desperate to get back to doing face-to-face. So we can provide lots of opportunities for, as Rose says, social events, quizzes, audience participation from across the globe and so on. And the technology is out there to do really whatever we wish on that. I think we might have to look at some data handling issues as well, how people share their contact details, how people want to be seen, while still protecting themselves from lots of unwelcome contact afterwards. I'd like to say I have the answer to this. I don't. We're still feeling our way to some extent.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Chip in there. Could I just chip in there, Nick, and just say,
yeah, go ahead.
It's growing all the time. The developers are responding all the time. So as things will improve from this year's experiences. They're learning. The learnings are with every level of the delivery of hybrid and virtual events. So people are learning all the time. And definitely the networking and the social element is one I think they're particularly focusing on.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. So I want to bring us back to thinking about in-person events. As Susie just said, it is something that we're all desperate to get back to. We've got 3 questions around that. I'm interested in hearing about in-person events from one questioner. Does the panel think that prices for venue hire will increase next year? And what pricing strategies should venues adopt for hybrid or digital events? So thinking about pricing, as Susie was introducing, but also in person and what the impact of that might be. Zoe, do you want to kick off with this one?
Sure, yeah, no problem. So from our point of view, we're not putting prices up for 2021, and we'll review the situation again sort of mid-2022. I think that event managers are going to be under more pressure in terms of their budgets, and so I think they won't necessarily get more expensive, but that the way that they're structured may change, as in we may move to more venue hire and catering costs rather than delegate rates, and depending on how long the social distancing continues, venues may have to consider, but I think this is a year into the future, may have to consider what they do in terms of delegate rates, or whether they move to a different model to make events financially viable. But I think for the moment, I get the impression that people are keen to get people meeting again when it's safe to do so, and so they will look to support them where they can in terms of pricing.
Thank you. And Madalena, you want to add to that?
I agree with what Zoe said, and I do think that flexibility is very important from both sides, both the venue and the client. We must recognise that we are all under pressure, and we are really on the same team after all. And sort of quick reaction time and adapting to the needs of the client as they change with the government regulations and so on is important. Having conversations up front, as always, even more so today.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to close with one last question that was pre-posed, which is something that's on all of our minds, and that's to do with the possibility of a booking being made and then it cancelling. And the question is, with restrictions constantly changing, how can terms and conditions keep up with deposits taken in advance? General thoughts about that, Susie?
I think key for us will be making sure that we have very close relationships with our venues anyway, but I think we need to be even closer. There needs to be, as Madeleine said, there needs to be a feeling of all of us being on the same team. And that's something that we've actually experienced over this year with our venues. We felt very much a partnership in trying to sort out where we go next. You know, we've all as event organisers, I think, said to our clients, here's your contract, please read the T's and C's, the venue contract, please make sure you understand them before you sign them, discuss any with us that you think you may have issues with. I think we've got to be more rigorous with that. And I look back and I can think of instances where a client would have said, yes, I've looked at the TCs, they're fine, we'll sign it. And I think nobody now can afford to be blasé about that. And I think I would even go as far now as to be advising clients to actually get someone from their legal team just to have a quick look over contracts before they sign them. I don't know if Zoe would agree with this, but I think that there'll be T's and C's that come out now, and I think that this will be an iterative process. T's and C's will be written and rewritten over the next few months to a year, because we're in a constantly changing situation. Yeah. And actually, I feel for people like Zoe on that. I think that's very tough for them.
Thank you, Susie. Zoe, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think T's and C's will be almost tailored to specific events, and the more open that you can be with each other, like Madeleine was saying, you know, trying to work together, the better the situation will be. So you may end up with a situation where you've got a contract that says, you know, you must confirm by September if your event is the following March, or you get an option to do something different, and that may be to look at hybrid or a virtual option, or it may be to postpone further. But yeah, as it's tough from both point of view, but I think as long as you have an open dialogue with each other and everybody knows, you know, nobody knows that, you know, what's going to happen really, but you know, just to be honest with each other with your plans, and to try it so that we're not in a situation where you've got a week before the event and it ends up not going ahead.
Yeah, very good advice. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, thank you very much, panel. There is one final question which is about Zoom fatigue, but I'm going to keep that for a little bit later on. So instead what we're going to move to now is questions that have been posed during the event. So they appear in the order of preference in terms of how you've upvoted them. So we're going to start with, what are the main potential pitfalls of hybrid events and how can you overcome them? Let me see, I'm going to go to Chris on that one first, please.
Yeah, I think, you know, the most important thing is to partner up with a company, a technology provider that really understands in-person events and also understands you know, how to integrate them. I think there's a lot of companies out there that know sort of how to do virtual events, and there's some that know how to do in-person events, and then there's this crossover. So first of all is picking an experienced team to help deliver it, and then it's just about making them feel included, basically. I mean, I think it's very easy to sort of accidentally exclude the audience members that are coming in remotely. So you know, right from the planning stage, you know, you shouldn't be looking to say, well, let's just take the same format as we always do for our, you know, annual conference or whatever, and just, you know, have that exact same thing and just put as much of it as we can out to the hybrid audience. You need to replan your event. You know, you need to have elements of it that are tailored towards, you know, both sets of audience members.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I can see various panel members nodding here. Rose, you talked earlier about confidence in your technical team. Susie, I just want to ask you whether you've got any suggestions around potential pitfalls and how to avoid them.
No, to some extent I don't, because it's still a huge unknown. We know there's technology there, we know who to ask and so on. But what I would say is that as event professionals, we've spent our working lives thinking on our feet, reacting to fast changing situations and making sure that we get in there and turn something around very quickly, something unexpected. We're used to doing that. And I think we should all feel confident that, you know, if we didn't have that skill innately, we wouldn't still be doing the jobs we're doing today. So I feel confident that we can meet the challenges that are here.
Yeah, great, thank you. A really interesting question from Anita. Hi, Anita. What have you learnt about virtual events that you would like to use once face-to-face events can take place again? Rose, you're nodding. Do you want to tell us about that?
I think what I've learned from the virtual events is that people appreciate starting a little bit later in the day. That's one of the things. I've also learned that they're hungry for the networking, because it wasn't that straightforward. So they are hungry for that, and that they want some buzz. And so if, you know, the virtual events you perhaps lack, it's easy to lack a bit of buzz. So we tried to be as creative as we would be in a face-to-face event. So we've learned that the creativeness is really, really important for your face-to-face events as well. And also that, I was going to say then, that, yeah, it's about the hunger for the networking. So it's really put an emphasis on that face-to-face element. So that's probably the biggest learning. But I know the other big one is that the poster sessions that we had with the Congress. So normally you'd have poster boards and everyone would walk around. We have actually learned that having the ability to see a poster electronically and focus into it is actually far more valuable than just a paper poster board. So that's one of our big takeaways that we've learned through virtual. I don't know if you can add anything to that, Madalena, from our virtual experience, but that would be one.
Yeah.
We would like to replicate that in a face-to-face, so that your virtual audience have that same experience, but the face-to-face audience have that great experience as well.
Yeah, I'd say definitely don't disregard the social softer elements. Don't just go in straight for the main content, which is important, but having some of those, I don't know, your virtual photo booth or icebreakers, fun elements, just they do add to a virtual experience for the delegates, which they would normally get in their free time during a Congress, but otherwise they wouldn't get on a virtual platform. And my second biggest thing is the potential for long-term legacy that the virtual event provides, in the fact that you create this you know, all the recordings that come out of a virtual event, which become they are owned by the association, the organization, and provided that the necessary consents were recorded from the speakers, these can be kept on an archive, on a website, shared with members in the future. So that the potential for a long-term legacy here is quite important, and hopefully this will somehow translate when we sort of go back to whatever the normality will be.
Yeah, thank you very much. The next question I think we've partially answered, but Zoe, I'm going to come to you on this in case you've got a venue take on this. Do you have any recommendations for hybrid meetings as different from events where some participants will be at desks or in the meeting room while others are still working from home, but we want everyone to feel included and have a voice?
Well, only to say that I think
the venue that you work with needs to be able to recommend hybrid options, and needs to be able to listen to the client's requirements and find out what it is that they're trying to do. And there isn't a one size fits all. So having contacts within the AV industry to be able to recommend, and also in case of budgets as well, we want to be able to do this, but we only have this much money. So really looking at that venues to be that bridge between the client and the AV provider, I think is going to be important.
Thank you. From Christina, we've run a number of online events now, and while they've been great from a point of view of information sharing, we've struggled to provide the same sort of buzz and networking opportunities that in-person events provide. Do you have any ideas of how we can make events more genuinely interactive? I know we've covered a lot of this, but just in kind of 1 or 2 words from each of you, quick fire in terms of suggestions about how we can make things genuinely more interactive. Madalena, anything to?
I'd say the one thing is schedule the informal networking time into the program, make it part of the schedule.
Okay, thank you. Susie? Susie, you're on mute.
That's better. I would say have some bookable meetings that can be networking meetings, and also some that are just available on the spur at the moment. Use your technology to make sure that that's on offer. And I think, rather than just have people trying to sort of network in a group with no focus, I would suggest that some of the networking sessions need to have a focus, which will then lead to people then having follow-up one-to-one chats afterwards.
Great, thank you. Rose, in a word, genuinely interactive suggestions?
Give them a buzz, an experienced host stroke facilitator stroke compare almost. Don't forget that it might not be a stage, but you still need, and that person can help sort of bring all that together and give it more of a buzz.
Great, thank you. Zoe?
Yeah, I would just agree with what Rose says, to try and give delegates something that they wouldn't get otherwise.
Thank you. And Chris?
I would say speak to us about quite an exciting new development called Spatial that we've integrated into our platform, because it really does give the closest thing to sort of natural networking that a lot of my clients have seen, and used it on about 3 or 4 events now, and have got it booked up for several more, and very exciting. So
yeah,
very
to
good.
just add, I've seen a demo of this, and it's very, very impressive.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. There's the information. There's the advert. You heard it here first. Spatial from Chris Watson's organisation. These questions are moving around. Oh yeah, we've been considering. This is from Molly. We are considering asking delegates what their thinking is about returning in-person events versus online versus hybrid. Does anyone have experience of this type of activity? Is it worth it? What sort of questions would you recommend? So just reread that. We are considering asking delegates what their thinking is about returning to in-person events versus online or versus hybrid. Yeah, you're talking about doing some kind of a survey to determine the level of enthusiasm. Is that? I hope I'm interpreting that question correctly. Madalena, what do you think about that?
I think it's a good idea. Sorry, be right back. There you go. I don't think it's a bad idea, especially with associations where you can get your membership quite easily, and that makes them feel included in what you're planning in the future. So not a bad idea. I mean, in terms of questions, I'd say keep it simple. You know, what are you thinking now? What do you think will happen in the next 6 months? That sort of thing. Don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. And Francesca's question, do we have a duty to keep our audience safe by not offering physical events until we're coming out the other side of this pandemic? Are we part of the problem by offering physical events despite audiences craving to return to the physical? Zoe, what do you think?
I think it's a great question, and I think that safety, as I said before, safety has to be the prime priority for event managers, but also for the industry. And there was some really interesting publications that were sent up by Mia and other bodies when we were given the go-ahead for events, to say, actually, this is not about just starting and picking up where we were before. This is really about building customer confidence so that we can continue to do events in the future. So as I say, you know, you really want to be making sure that your venue has your safety as their paramount importance. But I guess as long as you're operating within guidelines, meetings are important.
Thank you. I'm going to jump down to Angela's question, which is allied. We hope to run a smallish 2-day face-to-face event at a college in September next year for around about 40 to 50 people, half of which would be staying overnight, as they would be coming from abroad to experience Cambridge. What is your opinion on the likelihood of this being viable? And if we were to book it and then we had to postpone or cancel due to the COVID-related restrictions, would we expect a full cancellation charge? I want my bread and its butter on it. Yeah. Susie, do you want to talk to that? And then Rose, perhaps you could contribute as well. Susie, you're on mute.
I think it's another of those situations where we would all like to have a crystal ball. I can't call it. I really can't call it. And I think venues are probably the ones that are going to suffer the most in this scenario. As an events organizer, we can restructure what we're doing. We can move a year, we can move 2 years, and so on. We're not left with a big hole in our calendar, in a gigantic room that we would have earned so much money from. In this year, we don't have that kind of worry. I'd like to offer something reassuring about how this might be managed. You know, it's venues and other suppliers, I think, that are going to struggle the most. You want these venues to still be there, to still be up and running when we come out of this. We want venues to be there to use. To some extent, we are just going to have to suck it up, that venues will have to charge cancellation fees. Otherwise, we will be losing them. They'll be shutting down or moving their business elsewhere.
Yeah.
To be realistic.
And it's a very tough thing because finding insurance is almost impossible at the moment.
Yeah.
Rose, anything to add on that?
Not really. As you say, no crystal ball. Other than I think we're going back to, I don't know if it was Zoe or Madeline, that it's about those open conversations. It's about, you know, the uncertainty is there for all of us. So it's about those open conversations. And it's about planning dates when you say, well, we will have made a decision by. I think it's about not, I think we've got the experience now. It's about not leaving it. So it's agreeing with the venue, I would imagine. What's the sort of, you know, what period would it make sense for us to agree, let's transfer it to the next year, let's leapfrog a year or 6 months or whatever. So it's open conversations.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much indeed, panel. I think there are a number of other questions here, but I'm hoping that we've largely covered those. And if we haven't, I'm really sorry, everybody, but we're kind of reaching the point where we're going to be running out of time. I want to go back to one of the original registered questions for the panel to answer, because I think it's apposite for all of us, not just in terms of events, but just in day-to-day life, the meetings that we have to have. And the question is this: what can be done with virtual events to mitigate Zoom fatigue? I've been looking forward to saying that all day. Chris, what's your thought on that?
The most successful events from experience that we've been doing in terms of avoiding that is to keep those sessions nice and short. Don't try and make people sit in front of their computer all day, because you'll lose them. Stick to a half day at the most, with breaks, with the change in pace as well, not just all, you know, lecture after lecture. Mix it up a bit, and yeah, don't think about running a full day's worth of program online, because it just doesn't work.
Thank you. Rose?
I'm going to actually pick up again on what I said before about having a sort of a host, a strong host that actually, you know, brings some life into it, like you, Nick. So someone who,
the money's on its way.
Yeah, or every now and then having a little highlight thing, something that sort of, but short and sweet, definitely. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you, Rose. Sorry, Susie.
I think plenty of audience participation, so really good opportunities to ask questions and to actually interact with speakers as well, so that you're not just sitting static looking at a screen.
Yeah.
You're actually, you're part of it, you're part of the whole thing.
Thank you. And Zoe?
I think I'm going to approach it from a participant instead, in that be quite strong with your calendar and don't let Zoom meetings get backed up on top of each other, so that you do have that break. Because I think naturally with meetings you would have breaks where you're moving between spaces, and it can be really hard if you're sat in, you know, 3 or 4 interesting meetings back to back. Allow yourself some break.
Yeah, very good point, thank you. And Madalena?
I guess two small points is adapt your program, and don't think that you can take a program that was designed for a face-to-face event online. So really start again with those regular breaks and short sessions, and maybe choosing your invited speakers, keynotes carefully, because I think that could, if it is an interesting person, as with the chair or the host, people are more likely to be actively engaged even when listening. Yeah, those would be my 2 things.
Wonderful, thank you very much indeed. Panel, thank you so much for all of your insights. I'm going to come back to each of you in a moment for your final takeaway message to our audience. But just to sum up the kind of the points that I've sort of picked from this, venue safety is key, but also understanding what's behind people's reluctance, both the delegates' reluctance and perhaps the organisation or the organisers' reluctance, understanding about budgets, flights and transport issues and things of that nature. In terms of the platforms, to use simplicity and reliability, and having absolute confidence in your technical team and supplier seem to be the key messages here. In terms of networking and ensuring financial viability, adding value, thinking about perhaps exhibitions like Chris's idea of a roving camera. The fees must ensure that the event pays for itself, Susie's point, and budgeting is going to be absolutely critical here. And then adding things like social events, quizzes, audience participation, perhaps networking sessions. Under pricing, Zoe thinks that the structure of pricing may well change, perhaps fewer delegate packages and a different model that we may be looking at here. There was a question in the Q&A about should we be charging for attendance of virtual hybrid events, and I think absolutely is the answer. This is the only way that you're going to survive in those kind of situations. People keen to get meetings back as soon as the opportunity is there seems to be a key feeling. And we need to be very quick to be able to react as the government regulations change. Under terms and conditions and cancellations and that thorny subject, really understanding each other's needs, talking to each other. There may well be a need for more rigorous terms and conditions, but Zoe's thoughts are that these probably need to be tailored to every event. And then the thing about what we've learned and what we might adapt for in-person events. Starting later in the day, I'm all in favour of that. People are hungry for networking, so we need to find a way of doing that. Creativity, and my personal favourite is the electronic poster sessions. Visualising delegates crowding around a poster board and some of them squinting their eyes trying to read the small text. What a brilliant idea to put it all electronically. So just back to you then with your final take before we hand back to Judith. Let's start with Madalena.
There we go. I think the one thing that we didn't touch upon, and it might not be relevant for everyone, but is try to maximize sponsorship for events. I think you'd be surprised to find out how many organizations are still keen to support events, even in a virtual world. And if you do have your loyal sponsors, involve them in conversations early on and speak to them and see what their thoughts are, what their requirements are. And I think you'd be surprised to see that the results are quite positive.
Susie.
I would say make sure that you've got your objectives absolutely mapped out at the very beginning, and make sure that you have formed a team with your client, your suppliers, your venue, that you've all looked at those objectives and that you're all sure exactly what your return on your investment looks like.
Thank you very much. And Chris?
I think I'd just say, you know, don't fight the hybrid thing. You know, don't sort of try and dissuade people. It might not feel like a hugely positive thing for venues to be talking that way, but I think it's here to stay for a good long time. So it should be embraced, really. And for that reason, partner up with a team, you know, a technical team that's got experience of the kind of events that you're putting on.
Thank you. And Zoe?
I would say be optimistic with your event planning, but realistic and have backup plans.
Yeah, perfect. And finally, Rose?
I would say be prepared to continue learning. We are all on a journey of learning, and let's see that as a positive thing, and congratulate ourselves, because I think we've all done and been through an amazing time, and we're going to continue to learn, but I think we should feel very proud of ourselves.
Great note to go out on. Thank you so much, Rose, and thank you all of you panelists. It's been a pleasure working with you. Back to you, Judith.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much. That is so much food for thought. Lots of questions, lots of great answers. Probably more questions to be answered as well, and we could continue on this topic for a long time, I think. I've got a really short poll for those of you that are still on the call, and we'd really like to gauge your interest in a few questions. So if you could answer that would be fantastic. I'm absolutely delighted at how this has worked out. It really feels like the Meet Cambridge community is pulling together. My takeaways from that are, you know, do work together with your venue, use Meet Cambridge. We can help introduce you to venues and to suppliers. And I think from early days and at the beginning of the pandemic, I started to see technology, virtual hybrid, as possibly competition to in-person events. I think, but now I see it as much more complementary, and taking on what Chris has said, I think the door is wide open to reimagine events when we're allowed to meet again. And it's very exciting to see this new technology used in ways. I do feel, you know, that in-person events will come back as soon as we're able, because we're all desperate to meet again. But just things like those poster board sessions and having that archive of content that allows the legacy of the event to be extended is incredibly important. So thank you everybody for joining the call today. If you need our help at any point, do reach out. But thanks again to our panelists. Nick, amazing job. Madalena, Susie, Rose, Zoe, Chris, thank you so much. Merry Christmas, everybody. I think I can officially say that. Have a good rest of the week and look forward to seeing you in brighter days. We'll have a big party once this is all over, I'm sure. Take care, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.